A big warm welcome to all of you, and a big warm welcome to all the participants in the webinar who are coming into the webinar room now. First, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Eleonora Censorii, and I run Destination Everywhere Accessible Travel. It's a travel platform that puts together all kinds of tour operators around the world who have a specialty with taking care of travelers with disabilities, different types of disabilities. So it is in let's say in the framework of this company that I launched 3 years ago, that during the pandemic we started talking about accessible tourism online, and we started talking also about inclusive tourism. And after launching a Facebook group and a microsite about trainings for the tourism sector to make themselves more accessible, there is a website that you can find at accessibility.coach. And after the website, there was a Facebook group. And in this Facebook group, we met with Carr Donato, who is a wonderful, wonderful guide and a trainer of guides. And she had the idea to start talking about the issue of accessibility and inclusion in tourism, and specifically for tour guides. And that is why we're here. So thank you to Carr, and I would like you to introduce yourself, and then we will introduce our speakers, our wonderful speakers. Thank you all. To you, Carr.
Thank you, Eleonora, and good day, everyone, wherever you're calling from. I'm Carr Donato, calling from Washington, D.C. Today we have a very cloudy day in our city, but we are very excited to meet you all from around the world in our Make It Exclusive Heritage and Tourism for, with, and about all. So this program is very interesting because it has never been talked about in all the webinars that I've attended since the pandemic started. So I thought it might be an interesting idea to come and speak about it, especially through the lens of a tourist guide. So with Eleonora and her initiative, we put the panel together, and here we are going to be talking about the different ways we handle our groups to become inclusive. So the tagline is tourism as a vehicle for inclusion and income, and what is the other I?
Integration. It was integration, inclusion, and income.
That's right. So those are the three main topics that we would like to explore with our panelists. So thank you for having all of us here, Eleonora, and I applaud your initiative for doing this.
Okay, so I will give first of all a welcome now to our speakers, but then we will introduce them more completely when they will speak. So thank you to Jim Carr, who is a Guild certified master guide trainer, who runs Latino tours in Washington, D.C. and New York. Welcome, Jim. And then Ella Schiralli, that's how I'm told it has to be pronounced in American, because it's an Italian name, who is a guide of Capital City Custom Tours, who runs a very wonderful tour, which we're very curious to hear about, which is called Under the Rainbow, which is focused on the LGBTQ community. So welcome, Ella. And then welcome Damiano, who is also Italian, but lives and works in London, where he runs Seable Holidays, which is a company, a tour operator specializing in tours for people who are blind or partially sighted. So welcome, Damiano. And finally, last but not least, Daniel Osmanagic, who is a tour guide and who runs, and he's already laughing, he runs tours, working for No Limits Tours, which is a company situated in Ljubljana, Slovenia.
Hello, welcome.
Hello, and he's specializing in tours for people who have a mobility disability. So welcome Daniel, welcome Ella, Jim, and Damiano, and most of all Carr. to you to introduce our first speaker.
Yes, so we would like to begin the panel by introducing our first speaker for today, Ella Schiralli, who was my student as a tourist guide in 2018. So she's 2 years in the field, and she has already done an enormous contribution to the industry because of her specialized niche market. So Ella is going to talk to us about that. And Ella, you have the floor right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Shall we start with a little video? Join Ella under the rainbow. The queer history in Washington, D.C. is rich. Human Rights Campaign is the largest lobbying organization for human rights. And their mission is very well and clearly stated here on the building. It is to ensure that all people have equality and are embraced as full members of our society. From the vibrant Pride Parade to the colorful White House, we celebrate marriage equality. We have special events like the high heel race. Every Tuesday before Halloween, the drag queens come out wearing their high heels, fancy costumes, and the whole city comes out to celebrate. So under the rainbow here in Washington, D.C., come take a tour with Ella. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of some of the special events that happen in Washington, D.C. in and around the queer community. So my name is Ella Schiralli. I am a licensed certified guide here in Washington, D.C. and had the good fortune of meeting Mara Carr, getting trained, and also joining the Professional Guild of Tour Guides here in Washington, D.C. This is basically a sort of a second career for me. I had a traditional job working with industry, selling to the U.S. federal government. And when my position was eliminated back in 2018, I thought to myself, well, what do I want to do next? And I wanted something that was more creative, more fulfilling. And then I started to think about, well, what are your assets and what do you love to do? You should always work at something you love, because then it won't feel like work. And I said, I love to travel. And I live in one of the most consequential cities in the world with rich history. And I thought, why not be a tour guide? And I must say, it has been such a delight and a pleasure. So I have thought about what I would like to do, and it's really to share experiences and open up people's awareness to things that they may not know. So for example, my LGBTQ tour, I call it Under the Rainbow, and it's the history of the queer movement, which is a social justice movement here in the Washington, D.C. area, people, places, and events. So I get to open up people's knowledge and understanding about queer history and people in particular. I start out with a Revolutionary War general, and then we talk about some of the events that have taken place in the struggle for equality and the social justice movement. So that's one particular tour that I've developed and designed, and have had great response from people who've taken the tour. I call it a kind of a judgment-free zone, and we have the opportunity to ask questions and give experiences, and lots of different questions. The women's tourism, that's another area that I'm focusing on. And there's another tour operator here in Washington, D.C., a tour of her own, that's focusing on bringing the history of women to our awareness. This was a very big year in the United States. We celebrated 100 years of women having the right to vote. So what I'm holding here is the Declaration of Sentiments. It was the women's version of the Declaration of Independence that was signed back in 1873, I believe it was. So that struggle for women's right to vote lasted over 73 years. So we start to make some connections with different parts of our history, our culture that's not as well known. What I really like to do is show the vibrancy of our community. And embrace all people. It's the differences of opinions and different traditions that come together that make our culture so vibrant. And we see this here in Washington, D.C. in a number of different ways. One of the things I love to do is look at the monuments, for example. It's part of our history, and it tells a story when we look at a monument. But what I'd like to do is take guests and go the next layer from seeing something visually to what does it mean? What's the intangible? How does it make us feel? Sometimes even the senses. How do we engage our senses? And that can be food, it could be smells, it could be the warmth of the sun. So this is the kind of what I like to do. Now, what's the one question we've had is sort of what's the funniest thing that's ever happened on tour? And I will say, for me, it was when I was a tourist, and it was taking us to the native culture area in New Mexico, Arizona area. And I remember the guide said to us, well, why are you on this journey? And I panicked. I thought, I'm not on a journey, I'm on vacation. I didn't know what on earth I was going to say. Well, I say that because we want to meet people where they are. And so for me, that was so extreme. I was like, oh, but in fact, it was a journey. But I came to understand that a little bit throughout the tour, right? Not right at the beginning. But anyway, so I think that's a little bit, and I'll turn it over now and would like to answer more questions later.
Yes. Okay, Ella, fascinating. Thank you for that wonderful presentation and that video. And I think your business is really doing good. Now, we would like to know, how do you define cultural tourism and why is it important to you?
Sure. So cultural tourism is going beyond just what we see. Here's an example of when I was attending the World Federation of Tour Guides in the country of Georgia. I can look at this statue, I can touch this statue, but what does it mean? This is the tamada. This is the person who shares the wine. Now, the wine is such an important part of that culture, and it is in this region where wine was developed 8,000 years ago. So knowing more about the intangible and the customs and traditions behind the visual things we see and experience. Cultural tourism, beyond the tangible, the intangible, the feeling, the senses.
Thank you, Ella. And you mentioned that you are passionate about leadership and diversity. Can you tell us more about your passion and how does it relate to guiding?
Great question, thank you. I do work with a lot of student tours here in Washington, D.C. And what I love to do is show students in particular, but it relates to everyone, history here. But that history, or the things that they see and experience, and when they have aha moments, it's something that inspires them. And we all need to be aware and inspired to be good citizens and to have a healthy society, this social justice community that we're still striving for. So the diversity of people, their thoughts, how they approach life, their worldview, this is something that we should celebrate. The more we know about people who are unlike ourselves, the more rich we will become, the more confident we will become, and building that just society that nurtures everyone. And that's leadership of people and environment, social causes. Be engaged and be inspired.
Great. And for the last question, Ella, can you tell us what's next for Tour with Ella and how can that provide a vehicle for inclusion, integration, and income?
Great question. One of the things that I'll be doing now, and I think everyone has the opportunity after and during this pandemic and afterwards, finding partnerships where we can really bring our craft to other groups, institutions, like restaurants, where we can talk about food and different cultures through the food that we eat. Different either museums or parks or activities, events, bringing people out and to experience, because I think many of us have felt very cooped up. So turning this into a profitable endeavor by creating nice specialty tours that can engage local people as well as guests as they begin to come back and travel outside their local communities, but enhancing that experience with the different senses we have: food, smell, activity.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ella, for that contribution. I think you have enlightened us a lot about the gay community in Washington. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Ella. We have to plan then a gastronomic LGBTQ tour next.
There you go.
So it's a wine tasting in. You have to think up something. This sounds really like a really great idea.
Wonderful.
So thank you very much, Ella. And now we go on to Damiano. And Damiano La Rocca, founder and CEO of Seable Holidays. So we want to hear it from him, and we have a little video. Shall we show that first?
Yes, thank you. When I was under the water, it was just a totally new world. Everything just completely felt different. It's the best way of relieving stress and meeting new people, and you know, it shows that just because you're disabled doesn't mean it's a disability. You can't spell disability without ability.
My name is Stephen Campbell. I'm 27 years old. I'm from Ireland and I'm totally blind. I was able to do scuba diving, I was able to do jet skiing, some windsurfing to try it out, 4x4 off-road driving, as well as meeting other blind people so I can connect more and build up my network. Has Seable helped me achieve well-being? I believe it has, as I've been put into a new sport that I know will love, and I know that it will help me increase my confidence and will help me meet new people. Even though that I'm blind, still allows me to either do more or the same amount of things as a sighted person does. I loved every single moment of my time here in Sicily. I would like to recommend Seable to everyone out there physically disabled or sensory disabled, as I believe it will help you improve your capability of meeting new people and improve your social skills.
Thank you.
Welcome, Damiano.
So,
Did Stephen come back?
yes, it did for a few years after. So thank you for showing the video. It's a bit of an old video, but it's always good to see it again. It's been a long way since. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure that even though there is a pandemic and all of this going on, there is stuff that's happening. So I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about Seable and how it started. So I was at the university here in London about 8 or 9 years ago, and I was studying accessible tourism as a way of improving a country's economy. And I've decided to look at Sicily, which is where I'm from. And coincidentally, my father is a scuba diving instructor in Sicily for blind people and wheelchair users. And he was helping rehabilitating, and he had this little charity that was doing very well, but it wasn't recognized much because sadly the charitable world in Italy is not as good as it is in the US or in the UK. So I've decided to make those activities that he was running more recognized, and I've decided to try and offer scuba diving holidays for people from the UK that want to go and try this activity in Sicily. So I've set up a little tour operator, and I have realized straight away from my first day that it was a great idea, but there was a need of my presence in literally every day for every holiday. It was fun the first few years, obviously, going on holiday with all these people, trying to understand their needs. And then I realized that to scale and to make it sustainable, I had to replicate myself. I couldn't run every holiday. So I proposed the idea to my university. They really enjoyed it. And from that moment, I started to develop a training that allows guides, I call them chaperones because they're not really tour guides, to allow chaperones to guide blind people, and so to allow me to expand in destinations and be able to offer the same service in every destination. So 8 years obviously after that, we have now a very good selection of destinations, still very small because it's very difficult to get it right, and I really like to have a very good connection and partnership with the destination, so I take time to train. But we have about 8 or 9 destinations, and we launched group holidays last year. So it was obviously before lockdown, it was in a very good place. I can talk about the training a little bit more, or shall I wait for questions on the details for the training?
No, if you want, we can talk about. We have a few questions for you already, but I would say that you can talk about the training now. So then, if people have more further questions, then.
Okay. So before going into the training straight away, I proposed obviously the idea to different funders in the UK to explain what we were doing. With this holidays, we were improving social impact on people, on blind people specifically. So I've turned all the services into holidays for blind and partially sighted. So I've kind of put aside wheelchair users holidays just because there is already a lot of offer. And I have specialized in blind and partially sighted, and we have received every year awards from different funders that could see the benefit of these holidays. And up to last year, where we received the last award, which kind of took us to a next stage of selling the training to different travel agencies, tour operators, as well as national tourism boards. So we did this in Thailand and in Italy and in different other regions in Europe. So the training, it's really for me to be able to send a customer without my presence, and most importantly is for my partners, so my suppliers or the partners, to understand how to look after a blind person that's on holiday. To have there is a general standard, so that if someone comes in Italy or in Spain and in the Netherlands, and they come through Seable, they will always have the same style of guiding. Obviously with different character. Someone in Spain is going to be probably more warm than someone who's been guided in the Netherlands, but the standards and safety and the trust and the confidence is going to be always the same. So this training is really just to give confidence and trust to the chaperone, that they know what they're doing, so they feel confident, and they can transmit this confidence and trust to the blind person. The training involves a lot of different aspects. I have a little manual that I prepare, and I tailor it for each destination. It covers simple and basic stuff that when I tell you these things, you will say, oh yeah, of course. But obviously you won't do it until I tell you. So it's very simple things from when the customer arrives at the airport, how to say hello, how to help with luggage, when you get to the accommodation, how to do the check-in with him, how to show the room surroundings. It's very little details that make the customer feel like you know what you're doing, so he can trust you. We go over meal times, activities, excursions, and the different visual impairments, of course. If someone is blind, if someone is partially sighted, there are so many different types of visual impairment, and we try to kind of categorize them in big sections, and you will be able to take any type of visual impairment. What to do if something goes wrong. There is some health and safety, and yeah, and then the dawns of guiding. So obviously simple rules like listen more than talking, and very simple things. But we also provide a checklist at the end that is very helpful for everyone who's starting for the first time. And yeah, so this is pretty much what we do now. Thank you very much. So I welcome any questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is really interesting because you've really developed a method and a training program which makes it so much easier also for travel companies that do not. Would you say that it's a training that's also good for tour operators or local tourism professionals that do not have any experience at all with people who have disabilities? Or would you say that it still requires some prior knowledge and it's just like an extra skill, but you already have to be trained?
Yeah, so it's actually for everyone. It's for everyone. If someone was a guide before, or for a travel agency that didn't know anything about it, I cover some basic stuff about customer service and how to treat a customer, because at the end of the day, that's what they are, and it's actually for the general public as well. We've done this in restaurants sometimes or in hotels, so it's not necessarily for someone who's dealing with people with disability already, but obviously if someone is dealing, they have an advantage, but if they aren't, they're not penalized.
And I have one question. What would you say is the easiest and the most difficult thing that you have to envision, that you have to think about when you're preparing a tour or an activity for a person who is blind or partially sighted? What's the easiest thing to adapt, let's say, and the most difficult one?
So the easiest is to run it as normal. So basically there is no really much adaptation that's required. And the most difficult one is to avoid touching people, which is kind of a natural reaction. So actually probably 90% of my training is about how to avoid touching someone just because you want to help them. And this is a very crucial point for blind people from everywhere, I think. And they are obviously different types of guiding in different countries, but with the training, I teach this standard that they know that they're not going to be touched, because the simple things is to just, you know, close your eyes. If someone touches you, you're gonna jump. And this takes some time to actually switch if you've never done it before. So I do a lot of practice before with the people doing the training. First of all, we do it in the office. I put headbands, and then we actually do the training with customers. It's very important that I see the first reactions, and making the switch is really hard, and I understand it, but slowly it changes. And obviously you start to touch less to help, but guide more with your voice.
Okay, great. We have a question from James Exton from the UK. He's asking, is the Seable trainings based in the UK, or could you go to the tourist location to deliver the training on the spot?
Very good question, thank you. The training is actually at the destination where ideally we're going to start sending customers. So I run these trainings for destinations that are interested in receiving blind people from the UK, especially. So I would go in the destination to run the training, and then we would have some customer coming to the destination to finalize the training. But that's a good point. From next year, we're going to start to do it in the UK more. So there's going to be a lot of training done in the UK. But I'm still hoping that people invite us in their destination to do the training, because that's, at the end of the day, the great part of this job is that you can travel and see new places. And yes.
Totally agree. We got two more questions for you, but we're going to keep them for the end, okay, because we want to give now Jim and Daniel their time to present, and then we'll go back to these two questions that have been asked, which were for Damiano.
Thank you.
So Jim, I will share again my screen so that. And here we are. Jim Carr, who will be presented by Mari Carr. Just a second, Mari Carr, we cannot hear you. Let me see. Okay, here we are.
Okay, welcome
now
to Jim. Jim Carr has been my student since the year 2000. So I trained him to become a professional tourist guide. And from that time on up to today, he has been very active. He was working at that time for the government, but he was also doing a part-time guiding. And then I believe he is now semi-retired and is now completely into the guiding world. He is very active with the Guild of Professional Tour Guides of Washington, D.C. And I would like to hear his story. He's very active in the Latino community. Jim, the floor is yours.
Jim, wait, maybe we have to check the, oops. Jim, sorry, we cannot hear you. Just a second, because I need to activate your microphone. Jim, wait just a second. Voila. Oh, now we can hear you, I think. No.
Okay. Yes?
Yes, now we can hear you. Sorry, here we are.
Okay, so Marika, no good deed goes unpunished. And so I'm one of her disciples. She's the Yoda to a number of our tour guides and guild members, and that's a positive thing. So I was a federal employee, and I was a national trainer in charge of all training programs and education programs for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And I was also a training officer at several other federal agencies. So I was in the government for a number of years. And as Maricar mentioned, part of the time while I was still working in the government, I was doing tour guiding. So you see a photo of Ana and Jordi Linares. They are brother and sister, not husband and wife. They are tour guides from España. And it turns out my grandmother is from Oviedo in the province of Asturias. So I feel an immediate kinship with all Latino guides, and certainly those from Spain. So it turns out my grandmother emigrated from Spain in the 1800s. She went to Cuba, where she met my grandfather, who was from Puerto Rico, and eventually they emigrated to Ellis Island. My grandmother was pregnant with my mother. The ship that dropped them off was immediately sunk by the Germans after leaving them at Ellis Island. So that's sort of an interesting insight. So let's go to the next slide. So I tour for all kinds of groups, and I do some Latino themed tours. And when I have groups of adults or students who are from areas of the country with significant Hispanic population, I always incorporate things of Hispanic or Latino interest. So it turns out this is a copy of an announcement for 2 tours I did for the Smithsonian Institution. I did several tours on Latinos buried in Arlington National Cemetery, as well as several tours on immigrants buried in Arlington National Cemetery, because personally, I felt very important. It's very important that we point out, especially in the current situation in the United States, the significant role immigrants have played in our country, as well as Latinos. So let's see. So my experience as a trainer. I do take responsibility for training. We have in our Guild of Professional Tour Guides 3 levels of tour guides, and I train along with my colleague Shannon Mickish. We train and certify those at the top level, our highest level of tour guides who go through a very rigorous training program. They take a written exam, they give an oral tour, which they are graded on, and eventually you become a certified master guide, which is our highest level in the Guild. And I've been doing that for about 10 years, actually. So let's go back let's go back. Yeah, so this is someone, for instance, if I'm touring Arlington National Cemetery and I have a Latino group, I'm going to point out obviously things of Latino interest. Any good tour guide will have a good sense of who is on tour, where they are from, whether it's a homogeneous group, whether people are from different cities, put together by a tour company, or if it's a tour sponsored by a neighborhood or a group. And obviously, you try to incorporate things that would be of interest to the group. So here's a woman. She was actually an Army nurse who was killed by a rocket in Iraq. And very, very sad situation. I frequently see her fiance at the grave on weekends. So let's go to the next slide. This was actually a Puerto Rican rally. This is after the major hurricane in Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans both on the island and on the US mainland. And by the way, of course, Puerto Ricans are in fact US citizens. Some people don't realize this. This is Lin-Manuel Miranda, the fellow with the beard. He was the writer and the key actor in the super smash hit play Hamilton. He was one of the speakers at a rally of Puerto Ricans at the Lincoln Memorial. We had about 15,000 people there. Lin-Manuel Miranda was a speaker, as was Rita Moreno, the actress who's won an Oscar, a Tony, an Emmy, and a Grammy. And actually, I was one of the speakers well after Lin-Manuel Miranda and Rita Moreno. So just to give you a little snapshot. Okay, next slide. And these are group photos of school groups. I guide both school groups and adults, and it turns out these two groups did have a number of Latinos. The group on the right from California, the group on the left from San Antonio, Texas. On the left, we're standing in front of the White House. On the right, we're in front of the statue of Albert Einstein. So when I have Latinos too, obviously, you got to be aware of the differences. So for instance, a Mexican American from the Los Angeles area is quite different than a Mexican American from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and also quite different from a Mexican American from New Mexico. And later, if you want, I can elaborate on some of the differences. So I will incorporate, obviously, people of Latino interest, Latino-related sites in Washington. So for instance, in Washington, D.C., we have a equestrian statue of Bernardo Galvez. He was a Spaniard who fought the British in the American Revolution. A lot of people don't realize that the Spaniards played a significant role in fighting the British during the American Revolution when the colonies were trying to break away from Great Britain. You should know that my involvement in the Latino community has been long and deep. I've actually headed up a couple of Latino organizations. I was the head of something called the Spanish Education Development Center in Washington, DC. I've been very active in a national organization called the League of United Latin American Citizens. And for about 20 years, I've served on the board of something called the Harvard Journal of Hispanic Policy at the Kennedy School of Government. You should know that there is currently a movement afoot to create a Smithsonian Latino Museum in Washington. Within the last several years, we've had a wonderful, extremely successful National Museum of African American History and Culture Museum, which is a Smithsonian Museum in Washington. And eventually we will have a Latino museum. So thank you.
Great, wonderful. That was very interesting and very provocative information, Jim, about how you developed the Latino themed tours for the community. Could you tell me, have there been any challenges that you encountered during these tours? Anything that maybe, you know, there were moments that you didn't know how to answer questions? Were there different difficulties? Could you talk to me about that? Tell me something that was a bit challenging for you.
Normally, I'm not challenged, but once in a while. So we have groups of Mexican American kids who come from the valley, the Rio Grande Valley, and their world experiences are quite limited, and many of them have not moved more than their entire life has been spent within a 5-mile radius. So coming to Washington, DC, leaving their border town in Texas is like going to another planet. It's an intergalactic or cosmic experience for these kids. And I try to gradually enlighten them and make them feel welcomed. And I want them to understand that they are part of the American fabric and they have a lot to contribute.
Great. And again, following our theme, how can Latino tourism really provide a vehicle for inclusion, integration, and income? How much income has it generated for you, you know, focusing on these Latino community groups coming here?
Yeah, that's a good question. So occasionally I will do a group from Spain, but I'm mostly, when I'm doing Latinos, they're mostly parts of groups from places with significant Hispanic populations, like California, Texas, Florida, occasionally New York or Chicago as well. And obviously, I'm going to point out to these individuals prominent Latinos who have added and furthered the American spirit and want these adults and students to recognize that they've played a major role in creating the wonderful country we have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And now on to Daniel. Daniel from Slovenia. We are going to be talking about your activity as guiding tours for people who have a mobility disability. So over to you.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much, Eleonora, for inviting me to join this webinar. So thank you all for everybody who is watching us, and also big greetings to all the panelists. So as Eleonora says, I'm a representative of No Limits Tours. Like we are providing accessible tourism for the disabled, in particular the wheelchair users in Slovenia and also in the neighboring countries. That means also a bit of Italy, Croatia, and Austria as well. So how it started, like here on the photo, there you have me like as a guide, and the other gentleman with Feel No Limits shirt. This is Miha. He is our CEO of the company. So he came to me about 4 years ago and he said like, let's try to do something really unique. So he said like both of us are working for years in tourism, and Miha's father started a bus company for bus transfers back in 1986, which Miha is running now, and also many of the vans are accessible for the wheelchair users. So Miha also has now for 10 years experience in driving disabled people around Slovenia in different locations. So we decided to combine our forces, combining the fleet of adapted minibuses, and we joined forces with the social enterprise from Slovenia, which is working and helping Slovenian disabled. And then we basically formed a brand, No Limits Tours, to promote accessible tourism in Slovenia and also to the wider region. So the guy in the wheelchair, this is Anže, also like with a white shirt. So he was the one together with another lady, Petra. Two of them actually went all around Slovenia in parts of Croatia. They checked dozens of hotels, checked the accessibility. They checked also all the tourist destinations around Slovenia, what is really popular with the tourists to check out everything what is accessible. So we wanted to, in short, so don't take too long, we wanted to be 100% sure that everything what we offer as our services is 100% accessible. The main issue, of course, is accessible accommodation, that wheelchair users have normal needs, like they have normal rooms, normal showers, and also that everywhere we go around Slovenia, what we offer them is absolutely accessible. So Eleonora is also showing some of these nice photos. The first photo was taken in Piran on the Slovenian short Slovenian seaside. The first main square accessible for the wheelchair users. This is again Piran. Before that it was Ljubljana, the Butcher's Bridge, also renovated 10 years ago and made at that time completely accessible for the wheelchair users, also with an accessible toilet over there. So except for the city tours, which are quite popular, particularly Ljubljana, which won several Access City Awards over the past 5 years, as well, we also offer some kind of adrenaline tours, what is also shown on the picture with the lady over there on the Sava River. So this is Petra. She was also helping us a lot in the past with checking everything is accessible. So one of the things we also offer is like some kind of outdoor adrenaline tour in which we offer basically paddling, diving, zip line, which is all absolutely accessible for the wheelchair users. Also, some other things that what we offer is, of course, accessible transfers, because many times it happens that some people do not wish to have entire tour package what is offered on the website or custom-made tours, so they just want to have accessible transfers all around Slovenia or in wider region when they are visiting our part of the world. So we also always can provide them with an English-speaking driver who pick them at any of the location in Slovenia or in the neighboring states, and they then drive them everywhere else where they would like to visit here. They can do it with the guide or without the guide, as said. And also another thing what we offer is we offer widgets like equipment rental for the wheelchair users. So if they are coming from another part of the world, if they need, for example, what is the most basic need, I think, is like toilet shower wheelchair, for example, we can load them for very affordable prices here in Slovenia, bring them either to the hotel or bring them directly to the airport. So we want to make sure that they can enjoy tourism as everybody else. So this is actually the main point of the entire No Limits Tours program, as we are also calling it 100% accessible. And the main idea is to help the wheelchair users enjoy tourism as any other person on the planet.
Thank you, Daniel. I hope everybody was able to see the photos, because we had a chat message saying that they couldn't see them. So I hope I managed to get them back up again.
I saw it. Fine.
Thanks, Daniel. I have a question for you, because you have like really hands-on experience. You actually go with people on tours, and you also do the evaluation, as you told us, of the different locations where you take your travelers. Also for you, what is the easiest thing to adapt for a tour for people who have a mobility impairment, and what is the most difficult one?
Like when it comes to organizing entire tour, I always have to say that the biggest problem for us is always accommodation. I will just make it short, because like every hotel makes 1 or maximum 2 rooms, which is obliged by the law. But as soon as you have a bigger group, it is always problem in finding enough accessible rooms if we have bigger groups. So if you have bigger groups, for example, only this spa in Laško is the only place where you can put, I don't know, entire bus of wheelchair users, for example. Another sometimes problem is like where we have, for example, we want to visit some tourist destination which is accessible for the wheelchair users, but there's, for example, sometimes problem with the parking over there. So sometimes like me and Miha go either together in the coach, and then we offload the people at the bus parking spot. This is like always maximum 15 minutes where you can stand, then you have to leave. So then I take the group, Miha leaves, and then we call each other, and then he comes and picks us up again. So this is sometimes like where it's really needed that both of us are as well there. And another thing, like also we have sometimes like one of the issues I have to tell, like what we had, for example, like when we had our first customer, she was coming from United States, and she landed on Ljubljana airport, and there was problem, something happened with her wheelchair. Miha was waiting there, and until they sorted out everything, it took a couple of hours over there. So in case, for example, there is similar incident like that, then what we always have ready is a driver in Ljubljana, close to our office, who picks up, for example, another wheelchair and brings it to a specific location in case there are some trouble. So like these are a couple of issues that we have, and then we still have a little bit of issues with it.
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it would be nice now to launch the big Q&A session, because I see that there are quite a few questions that we haven't asked yet. So I would like to start asking them. I can hear an echo, so I hope the sound is okay. I will ask them randomly. First, I would like to ask you one question from myself. I exploit my position of power. So I would like to ask all of you, how do you think that your work creates more inclusion in the world? Because in some cases, it's about the content. In some cases, it's about the methodology and the type of activity. But how would you say, in your own everyday work, how are you creating inclusion? If you feel that you're creating it, if you see it, that the people that you bring on tour or you take on a guided tour, how do you see them change? What's your really your personal feeling when you take people out, and how would you describe your activity if you want to describe it as inclusive? How would you do that?
Okay, like, so from my point of view, like when I guide, and my feeling was like the most important feeling for a wheelchair user, that is, he feels like he's just another regular regular tourist, that like he or she feels that like you really care about that person, then you give her your knowledge, your attention, your passion as everything else. And usually they are not so interesting about details, like about when this was built or why this was built. Like this, I would say, like, humanity itself is the most important thing, that you show them like you care about them, and as much as you care about all other guests, they're not just some number, and then they feel like that you really care, that they feel like equal, and that you do your best to feel them, that they enjoy that holiday they came for and enjoy. And like for me, that is like the most important thing, like when you end the tour and when you see somebody with a smile, and that you see a person who really like truly thinks and cares, like that you took care of this person as best as you can, then you treated this person like as everybody else should be actually treating them. So this is the most important thing. Like when I finish with the tour and I see that somebody is happy, and this makes it, I think, inclusive, that wheelchair user, blind person, LGBT, or anybody else like feels that like they are happy and they enjoyed the place where they came for their holidays, and they enjoy and relax over there.
Super, thank you.
I'd like to add something on that. It's a very good point that Daniel has raised, and inclusion is kind of something that I think for people that work in it, it's more for themselves than for the clients. Obviously, there are specific situations where, for example, in my case, I have someone that is never traveled before, and they are like 30, 40 years old, or sometimes older. Obviously, in that situation, they are extremely grateful, and obviously you have done a big impact in their life, so you have included someone that was never traveling. But for a lot of people that travel, they don't want to hear about inclusion that much. Am I?
No, now it's fine.
So it's just, you know, it's just a holiday for a lot of people. So they I think it's more for us than it is. But for a lot of people, it's just a holiday. They just want to have a holiday.
Yeah, and I'd like to mention so I have different groups. I have some people who are attracted to the LGBTQ tour because they are queer. And so this becomes a safe place for them. They feel comfortable. And when people travel, they want to feel comfortable. And it's a place where they're able to be free and express themselves, their whole self. And on the other hand, when I have people who are not gay, it's an opportunity to really expand their understanding of what it is like to be gay, or have questions answered, again, in this way that is non-judgmental. Sometimes, you know, people say, I don't know anyone gay. You know, well, if I take you on a tour, you'll meet some people and you'll say, oh, wow, everyone knows Ellen DeGeneres now, right? The comedian. But it's really important to kind of celebrate everyone's contribution. And so it's one of the things I enjoy and celebrate when giving the tour.
Sometimes if my itinerary permits it, I will try to call on one of my colleagues or friends who can give a little talk, whether it's over lunch or if I have a student group. I may, a Latino student group, I may have them meet with a Latino organization because I've got that entree and I want them to know about the larger community, the national constituency, and some of the resources out there. So I will try to orchestrate a talk at one of the organizations or a mini speaker, so to speak.
There is a question for you also now that that we're there, Jim. Do you find, Jim, for you, do you find that when you talk about prominent Latino contributors to US history, that this can also open the minds of non-Latino students? Melanie Laforce is asking you, Jim. Wait for the microphone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I think I do try to do that. So sometimes I'll have a group where there may be only 2 or 3 Latinos, but I will incorporate some Latino insights for the benefit of the larger group, but also because I want the few Latinos in the group to understand that they're appreciated and that they've played a role as well. So yeah, so it's not just for the edification of a homogeneous group of Latinos, but ideally you want to make connections with the non-Latinos as well.
Okay, thank you. There are quite a few questions for Damiano. We will mix them a bit. Rachele Paolucci asks, but maybe we need a bit more specification on this question. Is the training provided FOC to local volunteers? I am not sure. Rachele, maybe you can, I'm trying to, okay.
So the training is provided to usually in travel to the tour operators, the receiving tour operators in the destination. And we do have volunteers, and we usually train volunteers that are coming as a group holiday. So we have volunteers in group holidays, but we also do volunteers training at the destination if there are interested people. Obviously, it's a different scenario, but yes, the training can be done for volunteers.
You say it depends on who actually contracts the training activity. Yeah. So if it's a local board of tourism, for example, they can decide to train the local companies, but also some volunteers that can then
exactly
be engaged in touristic activities.
Yeah, if it's for general knowledge or just to expand a skill, it's good. But if it's to volunteer in one of our trips, there is certain number of things that we need to do, like background checks. We need to do health and safety. There is contracts to sign. So it's kind of a process that needs to be followed.
Okay. But and then we have always for you one question which I find delightful. It's Elias from Central Asia who says, hello, I'm a tour guide from Central Asia, mountains, rivers, horses. I was wondering how to describe properly to a blind person the beauty of landscapes, because views are our main attraction for visitors. What can you say to Elias?
That's a great question. $1 million question. So it depends. It really depends on the person that you are guiding. There are some people that would like specific details of the views. Some people just want to hear it like you are seeing it. So it's a beautiful mountain, and then you can see what you think is it's nice to look at. obviously I deal a lot with British customers, and they like simple explanations, and they simple words that make it exciting. You don't have to describe a painting in detail. Sometimes just a few things, and you can ask, do you want me to tell you more about these views, or because it's quite great, I would like to tell you more. You can always adapt. You have to adapt it to the listener, really.
Okay. A question for Daniel. Do you have mixed groups with walking people and wheelchair users together? If so, is there any advice on how to keep the balance of handling the needs of the wheelchair users and meeting the expectations of the others in order to keep the atmosphere enjoyable and everybody satisfied? This is Maria Ulyanova who asks you, Daniel.
Okay, I have unmuted myself. Okay, привет, Maria. So in general, like we always have actually a mixed group of like wheelchair users and people who walk, because it's either families in which one or two persons are in the wheelchair users, or in most cases actually the wheelchair users almost always travel together with their own personal assistant. So far in these 4 years that we are working, we always had a combined groups of both. So far I have to say we never had any issues like regarding with the atmosphere, because these people usually always either live or they know each other very well. So far always the atmosphere was good, always between the needs of the wheelchair users and with the other guests. So but like during the tours, of course, we keep our priority to for the needs of the wheelchair users. So usually people who are not wheelchair users but are on tours, they always usually they are compassionate, and they usually work with these people, take care of their needs. Of course, they understand if wheelchair user always needs a little bit more time for toilet or some other needs. So I have to say that so far, like every tour, it was a mixed one everywhere where we went. So so far no issues with the needs. I have to even say that like when we just started with the tours like 3.5 years ago, I have to say like we had like one group from I think they were from Austria, and like me and Micha were still a little bit inexperienced, so we both went together, and like we always thought, we'll do something wrong, or will there be some special needs for the wheelchair user? So the wheelchair user lady actually didn't have any issues all the trip. There was actually more issues with the walking people, with the assistants who always complained and wanted something differently. So as I said, like in short, in general, always good atmosphere between everybody, and as I said as well, always a mixed group with us in No Limits Tours.
Cool. Maricar, do you have some questions?
Oh, I think it's fabulous. We're learning a lot. I love the diversity of the panel, and each one is giving really their experiences. It's so rich. You know, I wish we could, you know, maybe just break it down like the training. Very interested in the training piece, you know, especially for the blind, partially sighted. I don't have a lot of blind groups. I had a group once, but we had an interpreter. So it was.
We lost a bit, the last bit. Can you say that again, maybe? Because
I have not worked with a blind group, totally blind. I worked with a totally deaf group from France, but I had an interpreter, and they were the most active, engaged group in all my group history. They were just so attentive to me, and I hardly spoke sentences because I wanted them to see more, to see more from the motor coach windows than to hear me, because they couldn't hear. So mostly the visual, I emphasize the visual. But that was one in maybe 5 years. I wish I would like to really get trained in physical different abilities for the guests. So very interesting.
Yeah, for the deaf public, I've started a new service within Destination Everywhere, which is basically if people want to go to any destination, they can just drop us a message and tell us the date and how many people and which sign language they would like. So basically we find them sign language interpreters when they are on holiday, because in some cases, if it's an organized group, it's cool because you can have the sign language interpreter that can travel with the group, so for the whole week. It's rather tiring, I guess, but there are breaks, so it's feasible. Or we help them find also free sign language tours in the cities that they visit, or sign language guides, because I know a few already. Tour guides, licensed tour guides who also know sign language. And the only issue there is with the various sign languages, because there's not a universal one. There is an international sign language, but not everybody knows it. They told me it's a bit like an Esperanto. So it's kind of like this big mashup of all different sign languages, but I don't know, because I don't know any sign language yet. But that's really something new that we're trying out. So can't wait for people to start traveling again to test this new service with the sign language guides and interpreters. But we have another question, I think, that's popping up. We have a few that are very technical that maybe we can answer separately later. Cristiana Zama from Italy, she's asking to all of you, how do you manage all the costs in order to give all this assistance to customers without the tour becoming too expensive? I think it's more for Damiano and Daniel for the accessibility part, because Cristiana is a tour guide who is specializing in accessible tours, and so I think she's mostly referring to Damiano and Daniel. So how do you keep down the costs to avoid them being very expensive in the end? Who wants to start? Daniel.
Okay, I will then be the first one. Okay, so like in general, I have to say that I always give the calculations to Miha, because he's mathematics and physics, and he's the boss, and I'm social sciences, so I'm perhaps two left, and then I will give two cheap tours. But I'm just as a joke, like we try to, of course, make the tour at normal price, really. Like it would be like if you would order tour guiding and tour package for any other type of tourism. So booking tourist guide for the disabled, me or Mika, costs the same if I would book like tour or the day trip with the ordinary group. And then it's like we check out, like if we have bigger groups, for example, like
we've lost you. We've lost Daniel on the bigger groups, I think. Yep. Cool. We put that on hold. I think he's going to go out and then come back in the call again. Damiano.
So yeah, costing, it's a tricky part. Especially when in a holiday, for example, like ours, you need assistance pretty much 8 to 10 hours a day. So first of all, a big cost is usually, I'm sorry for obviously the official and certified tour guides in the room, but usually when you have someone who's blind, I tend not to use official tour guides, because they will have fare that are obviously good for their services, for their knowledge, and for the amount of study and preparation that they've done. We use chaperones. The chaperones are not a professional figure. They are kind of a second job, or they would charge a fee that's let's say less than what you normally would charge. Also, we need to find people that are happy and they understand the value of the holiday and what they're doing. So It's still a paid role, but obviously it's not to become rich, the chaperone figure. And then we try obviously and avoid all the useless costs that other holidays would put. For example, we try to go to local restaurants, and we try to cut the costs where we can to make sure that we can allow people to travel without spending a fortune.
Okay. I think we are running out of time. So
One
Daniel, tell us how you cut costs with the groups, because everybody wants to know now.
I'm sorry, for this. So, like as I said, like we always we book first. Like they give the price with the 3-star hotel. So this is like more or less normal price for sleeping. But if somebody wants to stay in 4 or 5-star hotel, then of course there is this additional payment. Tour guide costs the same, as I said. Like with the road costs and the pay tolls, like we can't do anything about it. It is as the government makes it, and as just as Damiano said before, also when we go to certain restaurant and have a lunch, of course we will go where somewhere is normal that that guests have a normal meal, try to some Slovenian cuisine, but when it's not too expensive, of course.
Okay, super. Daniel, we have a question for Jim, and then I think we can wrap it up. So Jim, this is a funny question. It's always from Elias, who says, to Mr. Jim Carr, I would appreciate to know which strategy would you recommend if the group had some religious, some politicians, and some fun-loving customers all together, and how to keep them in peace for a whole week. So if you have a mixed group with specifically religious and politicians.
Good question.
That's a great question.
Is that a trick question? Yeah.
No.
Obviously, no. I mean, I would make a general statement to the entire group that we're going to be together. We need to understand each other and appreciate each other, and discourage them from getting into provocative discussions that could lead to argument. Plus, I would probably talk to several individuals offline, separate from the entire group, and counsel them and suggest a certain strategy. Okay. I hope that doesn't sound like a cop-out, but that's what I do.
No, I think it makes sense. And Ella, I want to ask you the same question now.
Yeah, and it is a very good question, and it is, I think the basic, when we travel, we want to experience, and so we need to have an open mind, judgment-free zone, and in order to make the most out of your experience, keep your heart and your mind open.
I think it sounds great. I think we have to wrap up because we are almost at 5:30. Sorry, 5:30 at 11:30 in the US. Yes. And so Maricar, would you like to wrap it up?
Thank you again, Eleonora, for having this panel, this forum. I think it is extremely needed in our community. And we are celebrating World Tourism Day on Sunday, September 27th. And I think, this is a great way to open that celebration worldwide. And we should continue the conversations because it's very rich. It's something that has not been discussed too much, not as open. And I think this is the opening door that we are doing today, and we should continue that. As you said, you have monthly, perhaps we can do a monthly webinar or podcast. It's up to you, Eleonora. You have the forum to invite us in. We're there to help you generate these conversations. So thank you to the panelists. They've been wonderful. We learned a lot. Thank you to all the attendees who are here. And, please enjoy please keep healthy, stay healthy, and happy World Tourism Day on Sunday.
Thank you, thank you. If you're gonna smile, we're gonna take a screenshot photo. Are you ready?
Yes, ready.
1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, well, thanks also from me to all of you. It's been really interesting and fun also. And James writes to you, Jim. You should run for president after the. But this is really again very interesting, and I will send to all the participants the link to the recording in case they registered but couldn't attend, and you feel free to share it with your network and to get the word out. And I will send also some links to all the speakers, so if you want to get in touch and organize, take part in a tour or do some cross business, you will be able to. Already there was one of the participants who wrote that if there was anybody in the network in Emilia Romagna, we can share this in a collective email afterwards, so you can meet with each other and the participants. So thanks again. Thanks once more to all the people attending. I know that from all over the world, the participants from, I see Argentina, Kenya, Russia, various Europe, UK, the US. It was great. It's great to have you here. Thank you, everyone, and see you at the next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you all. Stay healthy.
Yeah. Stay healthy, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.